So my name's Pete Tucker. I'm a member of the Ontario Provincial Police, and this is my wife, Michelle Tucker. I've been a member of the OPP since 1994, and I'm speaking to you today about an incident we went through as a family related to my work experience. But I'm also speaking to you through the camera because of what's going on with COVID right now. Usually we do this presentation in person, but obviously we're being safe and we're doing everything by Zoom and the internet right now. And what we would like to point out is, as tragic as the event was that happened to me and to my family, we understand that we're not the most unfortunate people in the world. Many worse things have happened to worse circumstances for people. COVID has been horrible for some people, including deaths and illnesses. Ours was just an accident that did change our lives, but we got through it. So by no means is this a sad story. This is actually a story of triumph of how we got through things as a family. And we recognize that things could always be worse and that other people in the world have had worse experiences than us. So we try and keep that in perspective. So basically, I was a motorcycle officer with the OPP. I was on the Golden Helmets team. The date was June 26, 2014. We were doing a training mission. We were doing a training scenario where I was one of the instructors teaching people how to do VIP escorts for the upcoming Pan Am Games. So on that particular day, on June 26, I had an accident on the motorcycle, which I will go into more detail later. But as a result of the accident, my left leg was severed above the knee. Now, there's much more to this story, some of it funny, some of it interesting, but we feel if we show you the next video, you'll have a much better idea of how we got to this point where we are right now. So if we can roll that first video, it'll fill you in on everything you don't know.
We begin tonight at Sunnybrook Hospital, where the OPP officer that was seriously hurt in a crash on the 400 yesterday is undergoing surgery.
Yeah, his name is Constable Pete Tucker. He's from our Niagara detachment. He's a very experienced motorcycle rider. He's a member of our Golden Helmets precision motorcycle team, and he was operating on a VIP escort type scenario on that training exercise, so with many other motorcycles, and so he's very, very experienced. And it's just one of these fluke accidents where he just happened to be at a certain place when a goose collided with him.
Badly injured officer was airlifted to Sunnybrook Hospital this afternoon. The freak accident happened during a routine training exercise north of Barrie.
He was then airlifted to Sunnybrook Hospital after a brief time at Royal Victoria Hospital in Barrie, and he's undergoing treatment right now. He's been stabilized, and but there's going to be a long road for recovery heading for this officer and his family and everyone involved.
Dressed up underneath that old oak tree, the day we laid my grandpa down. For 13 years I'd been a shadow, his little man. I was learning what hurt was all about. That was the first time I ever saw my daddy cry. And he said, son, that's the thing about life. Yeah, the rain's gonna fall on us all. Your heart's gonna break sometimes, but there's no way around it. Life's full of mountains you're gonna have to climb, but there ain't no crime in crying. You just gotta keep on trying. So remember, no matter what you're going through, tough times don't last, tough people do. Baby, it's been all smooth sailing since we fell in love, but lately we've been on a rocky road. But if I know you like I think I do, you ain't giving mistakes. Love is gonna be our shelter from whatever comes our way. Yeah, the rain's gonna fall on us all. Our heart's gonna break sometimes, but there's no way around it. Life's full of mountains we're gonna have to climb, but there ain't no crime in crying. We just gotta keep on trying. So remember, no matter what we're going through, tough times don't last, tough people do. No, there ain't no crime in crying. We just gotta keep on trying. So remember, no matter what you're going through, tough times don't last, tough people do. Tough times don't last, tough people do. Tough people do.
So with the video that you just saw, I usually like to apologize before we show that, only because that video is definitely, obviously not a professional video. It was actually just a compilation of pictures and phone video that our family took, and then our daughter, who at the time was 16, put together. At no time did we actually intend for that video to be shown in a situation like this. We really thought it was just for our own family to really remember what happened and give Pete some perspective to look back on. I know it may seem a little bit odd to take pictures and video of your husband when he's in a coma, as you witnessed, and I really did struggle with that actually prior to taking that video, but I knew that I wanted to be able to show Pete how bad it really was, so that when he did wake up from the coma, he would be able to see that life could have been much worse, and in fact losing his leg was not the worst thing that could have happened. He is going to explain a little bit more about the accident itself and how it happened exactly, and then what came from it.
I have to tell you that I love my wife and she's my best friend, and we've been going out since high school, but she tends to exaggerate a lot of things, and as you said there, she said, that she had to tell me we lost my leg, and that's not actually true. We knew where it was. It wasn't missing, it wasn't lost, I just didn't have it anymore. Which is kind of how we approach things today. We have to laugh at some of this and make jokes where we can. But in terms of the accident that day, I was on a motorcycle. I was traveling south from Orillia through Barrie. I was on a training run on Highway 400. And I actually don't remember anything about the accident at all, or 2 weeks after, because I was in a coma. And really up until 6 weeks after, it wasn't until things started becoming clear again. And that's another reason Michelle's here and that my kids participate in this, because it wasn't just my accident, it was our accident. And Michelle's here because she remembers details and she remembers things that I don't, and she helps me fill in the holes as well. So on that particular day, I was told that I was southbound on the 400, and at some point I collided with a goose in flight, landing, taking off, I don't know. My speed was probably approximately 100 kilometers an hour, and I took the goose straight in the face, which gave me this little scar on my lip here, but it's also what knocked me unconscious. And apparently I stayed up for a distance due to centrifugal force, at which point I ended up colliding with a steel guardrail that severed my leg, and I flew through the air. I think it was 30 meters.
I believe it was 26.
26 meters. She won't even give me the 4 meters there. So I flew through the air for 26 meters. And as tragic as that day was, it was the worst day of my life, but it was also the best day of my life because I lived. So yes, it was a bad day. I lost my leg. Yes, I had all kinds of problems that developed out of that. But it was also the best day of my life because I got to come home and I lived. And aside from losing my leg and striking the goose, I had a lot of luck that day. And the very first lucky thing that happened to me was I landed on a patch of grass between the north and southbound lanes of Highway 400. patches of grass are very rare along there. And I happened to land on one patch of grass, which stopped me from going into the oncoming lane. As well, it had rained the night before, and I'm told that the grass was soft from all the rainwater, which also lessened my impact, although I disagree, because at 100 kilometers an hour, water still hurts. But my luck continued because I was with a bunch of police officers, the OPP Golden Helmets, and not only are we co-workers, we're friends. We were on a great motorcycle display team. We traveled together on weekends, we hung out together, we went to each other's family functions, we worked together. We were a really tight group. So what I'm saying is that day I had a number of professional people around me who knew their first aid, who paid attention in block training and learned their first aid, but they were also my friends and they cared about me. But they saw through the horrific mess that I was, and nobody freaked out. Everybody switched on to on mode and got things done, and they gave me first aid at the scene. But my luck continued because another great friend of mine on the motorcycle team, 2 weeks before, somebody had thrown him a tourniquet and said, the OPP is looking at issuing these to everybody, but here's one for trial. And being a typical cop, just like I would have been, he threw it in his motorcycle and he forgot about it. He didn't put it in his car. Well, at that point, he remembered he had a tourniquet, and they applied it to me, and the doctor says, that's another thing that saved my life that day. They got a tourniquet on me quick. And as a side note, apparently after my accident and the use of the tourniquet, the OPP authorized tourniquets for everybody. So there's something good that came out of my accident. As well, the next bit of luck I had is I crashed within walking distance of Royal Victoria Hospital in Barrie. Under normal circumstances, I could have walked there, but I was in very bad shape this day, so I went by ambulance, but I was very good. And I got there. And you would think my luck would start to run out now, but it continued again. As I was rolled into emergency, I'm told that a doctor from Sunnybrook, a surgeon, was visiting his friend at Royal Victoria Hospital. And the Sunnybrook surgeon stepped in and said that I was beyond the capabilities of the hospital I was at, and I needed to get to Sunnybrook. And he called ahead to Sunnybrook, told them what my injuries were, what kind of surgeries I'd need, and that I was coming in. And the final bit of good luck, I can't even make this stuff up. Orange had a helicopter in the parking lot at Royal Victoria Hospital that was canceled for somebody, for some reason it was canceled, and it was just sitting there. So I rolled straight through emergency and straight out to a helicopter and right down to Sunnybrook Hospital. So as bad a luck as I had that day, my stars aligned for saving my life. And again, I don't remember any of it. I'm told that from coworkers and from my wife. And that's where Michelle comes in to guide us through the next part, where I think I was in a coma for about 2 weeks. So she's really good at letting me know what happened at this point.
Well, and actually, before I get to that point, I am going to explain a little bit about how I got the news and what that looked like for me. Because at the time of the accident, Pete had actually been away with the Golden Helmets for a number of days. And that was not uncommon. Pete was often away with the team on weekends and so on. So for me, it really didn't matter to me exactly what city he was in. As long as he called in the morning, called in the evening, we spoke, or texted throughout the day. It didn't really matter to me exactly where he was. So frankly, I didn't always pay attention. And I didn't even know what city he was in that day. I happened to go to work that morning. It must have been a very busy morning because for some reason I don't actually think we had connected before I got to work at 9 a.m. Then that morning I got a phone call while I was at work, and at the time I was coaching some children in a gym, and my phone was off to the side because I don't usually answer my phone in those circumstances, and it kept ringing, and I kept ignoring it, and after it rang a number of times I figured, maybe I should answer this. So when I answered it, it was my daughter, and she was 16 at the time, and she said to me, Mom, there's a police officer at the door, and now they're on their way to your work. And when she said that to me, I think I just said, oh. And I immediately went into shock, because I think when your husband is a police officer and officers come to your door, you realize that that can be very, very bad news. So I went and I waited in my office, and I waited for them to arrive. And I will tell you something before I actually go further into the story. Pete and I had often talked about the dangers of his job, and we had talked about the fact, you know, when officers give news, for example, Pete had said to me, you know, Mish, if anything ever happens to me, you'll know. Because if one officer comes to the door, he says, I'm hurt. If two officers come to the door, I'm dead.
And that was cop humor meant to diffuse situations that spouses would worry about. I never truly thought it would come to fruition. I didn't truly know I was making a bad joke, but I was.
Yeah. Another thing that he had said to me before, he told me a story, and he said, you know, when officers give death notifications, they always use very clear language now. Because there was a story he explained to me one time where an officer was giving a death notification to a woman, and he explained that her husband was fatally wounded. Unfortunately, though, she didn't understand that fatally wounded actually meant dead. So it was later on during their meeting that she finally understood that her husband was dead. So he said, when officers come to the door, they will use very clear language. For some reason, this was all going through my head as I was waiting for these officers to arrive, because I knew what I was possibly looking at here. So therefore, as they arrived and they were walking towards me, I remember I just kept thinking, he's not going to say fatally wounded. He's not going to say fatally wounded. If he's dead, he's going to say dead. So I said, is he dead? And the officer said, no, but I won't lie. It's really, really bad, and we need to get you to Sunnybrook Hospital right away. At that point, they loaded me up into a police car, and we very, very quickly drove to Sunnybrook Hospital.
And another indication that it was bad is they sent two of my friends. These weren't strangers that went to Michelle to tell her. These were good, close friends of mine that went to tell her.
So on the way to Sunnybrook Hospital, again, I didn't know where Pete was coming from. I didn't realize that at that time he was actually being airlifted from the accident site close to Barrie. If I had heard that he was being airlifted, again, I would have known the severity of the accident. But in any case, as we were driving along, and we're going very quickly, we're passing cars, but I can't believe, and I still to this day can't believe, I didn't realize that people do not get out of the way for lights and sirens. For me, that was quite shocking. But they absolutely weren't. But amazingly enough, as we passed the Burlington Skyway, we got closer into Toronto, all of a sudden, about 20 officers on bikes, motorcycles, came and began to escort the police car. Basically, they wanted to get us there as quickly as they could.
It was actually the Toronto Winged Wheels, who were our counterpart to the Golden Helmets, and I had a lot of friends on the Winged Wheels. And what I always like to tell people about this particular story is another police service gave up 20 guys to come make sure my wife could get to the hospital. And yes, in the big picture, it's taxpayers' dollars. What were these Toronto police doing in Burlington? What was going on? But in the big picture, the familyness of being a police officer doesn't matter. They wanted to get my wife to possibly see me for the last time, and everybody pitched in and everybody did their part, and I'm forever grateful for that people were stepping up to make sure she could get there to see me.
And actually, and like Pete said, I mean, as wonderful as that was, it did really bring to light the severity of the situation, because I knew that at the time they were really just getting me, or trying to get me there in time to say goodbye, is what I understand. When we arrived at the hospital, there were police cars absolutely everywhere, and there were also media. There was media everywhere. As you may have seen in that video, you actually saw me getting out of the car and entering the hospital, and that's because there was media just surrounding the hospital because they'd heard about this incident. When I entered the hospital, they led me to a room, and as I entered the room, it was just like on TV, really. There was the commissioner in his white shirt, and there were a number of senior officers beside him, and I shook hands with each of them as they introduced themselves, and I just kept thinking, I don't know you, I don't know you, where's my husband, what's going on? And finally, a doctor came in, and he said to me, he said, his brain's okay, his brain's okay, his spine's okay, but unfortunately he's lost his leg, and his other leg is badly damaged. At which point I said to him, is he going to live? And they said, we hope so, we're doing everything we can.
So as severe an injury as losing